Imagine waking up in Dubai to the sound of your WhatsApp ringing. No VPN, no workaround, just a regular call from your sister in London wishing you good morning. The voice is crisp, real-time, and effortless. For millions of residents in the United Arab Emirates, that moment would mark the end of an era. An era where free internet calls were a luxury of foreign lands and workarounds, not an everyday convenience. And if one fine morning the UAE finally lifted the ban on WhatsApp voice and video calling, the nation would experience a seismic shift, socially, economically, and even politically. For years, residents in the UAE adapted to a digital landscape unlike most other countries. While WhatsApp was widely used for messaging, its calling feature remained blocked, along with other voice-over Internet Protocol VoIP services like Skype, FaceTime, and Messenger. People were forced to rely on local alternatives such as BOTIM and Talk, which were licensed and heavily regulated by state-run telecom providers like Etisalat and Du. These apps were not just lesser in quality, they were a reminder that despite all the technological progress, there was still a wall around digital communication. So what would happen if that wall suddenly fell? On day one, there would be an explosion of activity. People would start testing it out, first with curiosity, then with disbelief. You'd see families reconnecting over video calls without having to explain why the video is so pixelated. Long-distance relationships would feel a little less distant. Parents back home would beam at their children's faces on birthdays and weddings, all in high definition, all for free. The WhatsApp ringtone, once silent in the UAE, would become a new background noise in cafes, metro stations, and shopping malls. But behind those personal moments of joy, the effects would go far deeper. Let's start with the financial implications. UAE Telecom companies have enjoyed a monopoly over voice services for years. International calling, especially to South Asia, Africa, and the Philippines, has been a multi-billion dirham business. Expatriates, who make up nearly 90% of the country's population, spend significant portions of their income staying connected to their families abroad. When free WhatsApp calls become available, that revenue stream would take a substantial hit. Telecom giants would likely respond swiftly. They might pivot harder into data plans, raising prices subtly to compensate for the lost voice income. In fact, it wouldn't be surprising to see new VoIP-ready packages introduced, where users pay a premium to access high-speed connections optimized for calling. But no matter how the telecoms try to adapt, the power dynamic will have shifted. People will have options, the kind of options they didn't have for more than a decade. Businesses, too, would find themselves on new terrain. Small businesses, freelancers, and startups that relied on Zoom or paid VoIP apps, often with glitches and restrictions, would finally breathe. Suddenly, international clients could reach them on WhatsApp without issue. Customer support for local services could integrate calling options, allowing instant communication without formal switchboards or third-party apps. Entrepreneurs running e-commerce platforms or Instagram boutiques would operate more efficiently, offering customers face-to-face support through simple video calls. It wouldn't just help the small fish. Large corporations would benefit from a more seamless ecosystem. International teams could integrate their UAE employees more organically into global operations. Multinationals could finally standardize communications across borders without excluding their UAE branches. Remote work would become smoother, more affordable, and more in tune with global norms. But the ripple effects wouldn't stop at convenience and cost. Culturally, the UAE would undergo a subtle yet meaningful evolution. For years, the nation's expats, from construction workers to tech consultants, lived in a constant negotiation with distance. Even though technology bridged gaps in many ways, the inability to easily talk or video chat with loved ones created emotional strain. VPNs were a common workaround, but not everyone could afford them, understand them, or trust them. Lifting the WhatsApp call ban would democratize digital intimacy. Suddenly, a delivery driver could talk to his mother without worrying about the 3-minute limit. A housemaid could show her child their new apartment. These are not trivial changes, they're human ones, and over time, they'd reshape the emotional landscape of the entire society. Of course, there would be challenges. Increased call access means increased bandwidth demand. Telecom infrastructure would need upgrades to handle the sudden surge in voice and video data. Dropouts, lag, and connectivity issues would spike before things stabilize. but that's the price of opening the gates, and the reward long-term would be worth it. Security, of course, would be front and center. One of the reasons the UAE restricted WhatsApp calls for so long was its end-to-end encryption. With no way to monitor calls, the government feared the potential misuse by criminal or extremist groups, but today's world is different. Many nations with tight security protocols, including Saudi Arabia, have begun relaxing their VoIP restrictions. The UAE, with its advanced cyber monitoring tools and sophisticated surveillance programs, may feel more confident now than it did 10 years ago. Moreover, platforms like WhatsApp already cooperate with governments on metadata, call durations, contact information, etc., even if the actual content is encrypted. The state may simply decide the balance between security and innovation has shifted. There would also be a new level of political symbolism. Allowing WhatsApp calls would signal openness. It would align with the UAE's push to brand itself as a global tech leader, an innovation hub, and a modern nation. For a country aiming to diversify beyond oil and attract global talent, allowing unrestricted digital communication is not just a tech upgrade, it's a diplomatic move. It tells the world, we trust our people, we're part of the future. Social media would explode with reactions. #WhatsApp UAE would trend for days. Memes would flood Instagram and TikTok. People would post videos of calling their parents for the first time without VPNs. It would become a cultural event, a moment of unity. Influencers would narrate their stories, and media outlets would dive into think pieces on how the shift affects everything from business to romance. At schools and universities, students would find a new dimension of connection. Study groups, group projects, and peer collaboration would become easier. Professors could hold office hours over WhatsApp video. Parents could engage more meaningfully with teachers through quick calls, rather than long emails or awkward scheduling. In rural areas, especially in countries where UAE expats send remittances, the change would be revolutionary. Families with basic smartphones would now be able to see and hear their loved ones without needing apps they can't install or platforms they don't understand. For many, WhatsApp is the only app they trust, the only one they know how to use. A farmer in Kerala, a tailor in Punjab, a schoolgirl in Manila, their lives would feel closer to Dubai, to Abu Dhabi, to the loved ones they haven't hugged in years. There would be competition too. Other apps like Telegram, Signal, and Zoom would feel the pressure. If WhatsApp dominates voice and video in the UAE, it might crowd out other players, at least for casual communication. On the flip side, increased competition might push innovation. Telegram could add new features. Local apps might improve quality or offer niche services to stay relevant. The business of VPNs would feel the heat. For years, virtual private networks have been a necessity in the UAE, not for hiding illegal activity, but just to make a FaceTime call or attend a Zoom job interview. VPN providers made good money from a need rooted in restriction. That need would suddenly vanish. Only those seeking anonymity or more niche use cases would continue to subscribe. Over time, social etiquette would evolve. Previously, it was understood that a WhatsApp call was either blocked or required effort. That barrier created formality. Once calling becomes easy, people might start treating it casually, maybe too casually. Etiquette norms would need to catch up. Companies might establish guidelines: when to call, when to message, when to keep it professional. Just like email etiquette evolved over the years, WhatsApp call culture would require some learning. And then there's the psychological impact. The simple act of hearing someone's voice or seeing their face rather than reading a message changes how we perceive each other. Tone returns to the conversation. Misunderstandings drop, connections deepen. For a country built by people far from home, that emotional correction could reduce stress, improve well-being, and foster a sense of belonging. The decision to lift the ban would also set a precedent. People would begin to question other restrictions. If WhatsApp calling is allowed, what about FaceTime? What about new apps? What else is possible now? It would awaken a kind of civic curiosity, maybe even pressure. A tech-savvy younger generation might expect more openness. The government, aware of its image, may have to weigh future bans more carefully. And while all this unfolds, the rest of the world would watch. Regional neighbors might adjust their policies in response. Global companies might reconsider their strategy for the Gulf region, and tech developers might finally stop adding the footnote feature "not available in the UAE" to every update. In the grand scheme of global events, allowing WhatsApp calling might seem like a small move. But for millions of people in the UAE, it would feel like a door opening, a digital border removed. It would mean easier goodbyes, warmer reunions, more productive workdays, and more spontaneous laughter across screens. It would mean not having to explain to your grandmother why she needs to install a strange app just to hear your voice. It would mean freedom, the kind that lives in small things like a ringing phone and a familiar voice saying, "Hello, can you hear me now?" Yes, we can hear you, loud and clear.